I am so excited to have two legends in the field come join us. Today, Larry Ferlazzo is here with his co-writer, Katie Ho Sypnieski, who have
Yay.
given and given and given to the field with their books, their articles, and their webinars. So, Larry and Katie, welcome to the podcast.
Hi.
Well, thanks for having us. I think we're honored for the receiving the invitation to on your
Yes.
podcast has been increasing in popularity over the past year.
Oh, I just follow in the footsteps of giants like you and Katie. So I knew about you and Katie about 14 years ago at a workshop. Someone at the end of the webinar, sorry, at the NYP workshop in Indonesia, they said, "Hey, if you want people to follow this educator from California," and of course Larry Falazzo. And I was like, "Yes!" And then now you're joining with now you're joining Katie's, which is adding another perspective to it. So I knew you when back then.
And he's still the same guy.
Yeah, we're only legends in our own minds.
Right.
So,
Well, you're a legend. You're in the minds of so many that are listening. I mean, just look at the reviews on all of your books. There are 300, 400 positive reviews of your books. Now, you know that to get one review, to get someone to stop writing and to go online to write a review is hard enough. To get 300 to 400 4 to 5 star reviews on Amazon is an act of that was worthy of applause. And I think that's the reason because you still are in the classes. You are still in the classroom. The things that you're doing that what you share with us are the things you do with your kids. So they're grounded in
Exactly.
theory, but yet they're so practical.
and they always go exactly the way we plan them to go.
Especially in Larry's classroom.
Yeah, it's a well-oiled machine.
I still remember I almost got teary-eyed when I saw your tweet, Larry, a few months ago, and you were like, "I'm really tired today." And then like last year, you tweeted like, "Today I was really impatient," and I was like, "Okay, so it is okay to have a bad day. If Larry has a bad day, I can have a bad day. I can do this."
Yeah, it was a rough year, pandemic fueled year. It was a rough year for everybody.
Oh, let me share this quote. Well, one, I think everyone now, the whole world, appreciates teachers more because they finally get to see what we do in our classes with our kids. Right? Even though we're on Zoom, even though we're on Google Meet, now parents can actually see the kind of work they were doing with their kids. And secondly, I think there's a quote I want to share. It's an Irish quote that goes, "If we can winter in this season, we can summer anywhere." So for the last 15 months, teachers have wintered with their kids, and now we can summer anywhere.
Nice,
Very
nice
wise.
thought, reflection.
Yeah.
Okay, let's start with this. Can I ask each of you to share an experience that has informed your practice today? I'll let Katie go first.
Gosh, I know. And I was thinking my students are constantly and colleagues are constantly informing my practice. But one thing that early on in my teaching, I joined the writing project. And so I am part of the Area 3 writing project, which is housed at UC Davis. And as a student teacher, I was kind of, brought into the writing project and just that model of teachers teaching other teachers that teachers can be experts,
Yes.
are experts.
Yes.
And also the idea that we as writers um, need to write alongside our students. And that whole idea of learning alongside our students and, you know, doing and modeling and all of that just made so much sense to me in the beginning and then has really continued to serve me because that community is just full of so many amazing educators who are in it for the long haul are, just teaching each other. And yeah, so I would say the writing project has just been a great community and has grounded me in a lot of really awesome practices.
Right. I've heard of so many positive things about the writing project. I wasn't part of the writing project in New Orleans, but I knew
Okay.
about it. And
Yeah,
so the teachers that came from the program, they just raved about it being one of the most effective, fulfilling learning experience they had as teachers.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Right? It's all about the
Yep.
community.
It is. It
Right.
is. And
Right.
teachers teaching other teachers,
Right. Right.
sharing practices and supporting each other.
Right. And sharing beliefs.
Yes. Yes. Grounded in the same
Right.
philosophies.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. Thank you. Larry?
The experience that I'm going to share is actually one that I had prior to becoming a teacher. Uh, for 19 years, I was a community organizer. And uh, one day, well, we had a several months long, almost a year long, huge political fight led by low income English language learners, basically immigrants in a rural town, and to get affordable housing, to get an affordable housing complex built. And finally, after many political battles, it was came time for the groundbreaking. We won, and one of the leaders of the fight, who was a um, Spanish-speaking immigrant, Lupe, she got up on the stage. We had a little stage, and had all the city council people there, and she said, "Well, this is a great day, right? I'm going to be able to own my first home. All my friends and colleagues will be able to own their first home. It's a great victory. But the real victory is the fact that I now feel comfortable standing up on this stage speaking. I feel comfortable negotiating as an equal with city and state officials. I my children can see me do this. I can write a speech. Um, I know how to think critically and strategically. Those are the real victories. And I think that's the kind of message that uh, I like to focus on in the classroom. That yes, I want my students to learn English. I want them to learn the content, but more importantly, I want them to see the leadership potential within them. I want them to see what they are capable of doing, when they work with others. That by focusing on those kind of leadership potential, students can become even better learners of the content.
Larry, I know that your story is that of a community organizer, and now that you're a teacher, I would say that you are still organizing the community in a different way. Right?
Well, I like to think that. Thank you.
So let's start with congratulations on getting your second edition of your book, the ESL ELL Teachers Survival Guide. So let's talk about the second edition. So what was the seed for the second edition, or the first one, if you want to talk about it?
Well, I think we've written a couple of books since then, but as teachers, we're always growing and learning from our mistakes and our successes. And we've had a lot of at least our mistakes since that. It's been over 10 years since we wrote this, and we wanted to share that, not only for other people to learn, but for us to be able to process it. And as you know, we feel like there were a lot of topics that we did not cover in the first edition that we invited talented colleagues like yourself to contribute your reflections and your wisdom to make the book an even better one.
And for us, writing books makes us better teachers. And, so that is always a seed for us, because we definitely don't, do it for the money or fame. Well, I ride on Larry's coattails for the fame, but it helps, our own practice, and collaborating together has, over the years just really has made us stronger teachers for our students.
Right.
And it helps us so we don't lose stuff. Right? Geez. I mean, I don't know about you, but trying to find stuff in my Google Drive is like a maze oftentimes. So, put all our best stuff. I mean, as you know, for all of our books, we put all the figures, all the student handouts are online, free for everybody. You don't have to buy the book. So I know where my stuff is.
I've never heard about that before. Someone said, "Oh, I write a book. Why? To keep myself organized."
It's true.
I love it. Well, that just really speaks to, okay, the things that I do are working. And the things that I do, I share with teachers. And so that's actually why. It's not like, I think this might work. Here's an article that I read from a professor. Let me create the structure. Oh, I didn't really try it out.
Yeah.
Right? And you're really saying, absolutely try this out. This can work for your kids if you applied it to your own context.
Oh yeah, I think if we so often the stuff we design in theory, when we try to apply it, we realize that a lot of it doesn't work the way we originally developed it theoretically, right? So then we have to revise it. I mean, I can't imagine putting out a book of recommendations or lessons that we haven't done multiple times already.
Right.
Yeah,
it's like,
and we know that the teachers out there reading are going to make our things even better. They're going to take it to levels that we never even thought of.
Right. And you share that so freely on Twitter, and you're giving people a foundation to say, hey, go play with this. Go try this on your own. And I think that's why people really appreciate it. I mean, I'm thinking about your ELL toolkit, and I love the way it's structured. It's like reading, writing, speaking, here are the strategies, boom, boom, boom. I'm like, this is all you need. Right? It's so effective. Let's talk about, so your second edition is different than your first one, which you invited expert teachers in the field. They're just amazing teachers in the field who are contributing to your book. Would you run through the different chapters?
So the first part of the book, it's a couple of chapters, sort of the big picture of ELL instruction. What does the data say? And then overall, how to create a positive and effective learning environment. And then the second section, which includes 2 chapters, is on teaching beginning ELLs. And that chapter just lists and briefly describes and gives a quick example of our go-to strategies. Not the zillions of different strategies that we try now and then, but what are our go-to strategies, like picture word inductive model, language experience approach, songs. And then the next chapter is basically a year-long curriculum for teaching beginner ELLs on applying those strategies thematically in different themes with a zillion student handouts. And then the third section is doing that same thing with teaching intermediate ELLs, a list of our go-to strategies, and then what that looks like in a year-long curriculum. And then it's a big book. Okay, so our book is about at least twice the size of the original one.
Wow.
So I know when we first began looking at the idea of doing a second edition, our publisher says, well, typical second editions, they basically just have, 30% of the existing content is a little different, right? And so for us, about 50% of our original content is different. Plus we've doubled, we've added like twice as much new stuff. Then we have a chapter, the next section on teaching ELLs in the content areas, a chapter on teaching ELLs in the mainstream classroom, supporting them, a chapter on social studies. And then that's where we get the sort of the first guest chapters. We had a chapter on teaching science in our first edition. And that chapter will remain freely available online. But we had Stephen Flournoy write a new chapter on that. And then on teaching math, the same thing. We will take that old chapter, put it online, and we have Cindy Garcia, the ELL teacher from Texas, who's written a new chapter on teaching math. And Stephen did it in the context of the next generation of science standards. Cindy did it in the context of Common Core. So those are just the first 10 chapters, and then I'll leave it to Katie to talk about the remaining 15.
Right. I know. What? Yeah. It is quite a big book. And so part 5 focuses on working with specific groups of ELLs. So we have a chapter on teaching long-term English learners. And then this is just where I feel like the AllStar team starts. We've got, a chapter on working with elementary ELLs by Valentina Gonzalez. We have a chapter on teaching adult ELLs by Antoinette Perez. We have a chapter on teaching ELLs with learning differences, written by Jessica Bell. And those are all new chapters. And then part 6 of the book, further strategies to ensure success. We are going to have a new chapter on culturally responsive teaching. We have a chapter on addressing challenges and additional opportunities, and that chapter was in the first edition, but we've added a lot to that chapter. We have a fantastic chapter on home language by you, Ton, which is awesome. I think people are really going to get a lot out of that chapter. We have a chapter on learning games, on assessing English language learners. And then Carol Salva has done a really cool chapter kind of taking a different look at PD and talking about reflective teaching. But that's not it. There's a part 7. Part 7, teaching English online and around the world. So we wrote a chapter on distance learning, which is already available, which was published last year. And I should say last school year, at the end of last school year. We have another chapter by Ton. We're so lucky to have 2 chapters from you on teaching English internationally. And then Jenny Vo is adding a chapter for us on non-native English speakers teaching English, which is really cool. So yeah, a lot of new stuff, like Larry said. We're really excited about it, and we're really honored to have so many amazing contributors.
Right. Just looking at the structure of your book, I just really do feel like it lives up to the name of the book, a survival guide. And it really has every single thing that we need as teachers. And it might start with like the tip of the iceberg, but it gives us like a teaser into that topic, such as culturally responsive instruction, such as working with adult EL, such as working with students who are identified as long-term English learners, beginners. I mean, you just and the gamut of expert teachers that you have, I'm just so impressed. Valentina, Dr. Stephen Fleener, Jennifer Vo, Cindy Garcia, and on and on and on. It's just so impressive. You've really gathered the field together to share.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, we've learned a lot from reading and writing it.
I particularly really appreciate the chapter that you have Jennifer Vo sharing, because there are so many language specialists out there who are like me, who weren't born into an English speaking community. So we now know that people who are language specialists who come from marginalized identities often experience a lot of pushback. And so I'm so happy that you have Jennifer to share that experience from a very niche group of teachers.
Yeah, I mean it's crazy. I mean, it's especially outside of the U.S. There's this real discrimination against non-native English speakers. I mean, it's like in many ways, the people who have gone through the experience of learning a new language, just common sense, are better equipped to help learners of that language acquire it. I mean, it's common sense, right? Right.
So let's talk about two of highlights of the book. There are so many things that I want to talk to you about, but would you mind picking two to highlight for listeners?
Sure. I think for me, the one of the chapters on teaching intermediate ELLs lays out how we scaffold writing, and in particular, argument writing, how students can produce high level writing and thinking, and the way that we support that. We have a unit plan, a problem solution unit plan that we use every year with our students, and just they help us make it even better. And then we have a couple of lesson plans for scaffolding, writing, analytical response to text using a college level prompt, and how we break that down with students. And the chapter has different writing frames and writing structures that we use, and also how we teach students that yes, we give them the support, but there's no formula for writing that, or a certain number of paragraphs, or only one genre, and that in real world writing, different genres are blended and paragraphs are different lengths, and just really helping them build confidence as writers.
So, Katie, can you walk us through that unit a little bit more, like the structure of how to help intermediate students write?
Sure. So we kind of organize it in terms of all of the, academic language that we build, and we tap into prior knowledge and building background knowledge, and how, students can write and talk and read. And really then we move into having students select something that is a problem either in their own life or in the community that they feel passionate about and want to do more learning about. And so we give ways for helping them research, which can be a challenge, how to wade through everything and actually find useful research. They do interviews, and we scaffold that activity. And then just the writing process, we give some tips on peer review. We've tried a lot with peer review of writing. That hasn't worked. And so we kind of give, a couple of things that we do that really work with students, to help each other, with feedback and editing as well, and our own teacher feedback. So we kind of divide it with teacher feedback, peer feedback. I'm trying to think, Larry, what else would be important to say?
No, I mean, I think it's a fairly complete model that, even though it is focused on problem solution, it's a model that could be used for pretty much any genre that a teacher was going to teach. So, I mean, we didn't put complete unit plans for every genre, but definitely that can be applied. And certainly in our other books, we have had unit plans on argument and other genres.
Right. I think what you're saying is like there is, in the world of working with English learners, there's comprehensible input and then there's comprehensible output. I think what you're saying in this chapter is we provide an example of how to structure comprehensible output for kids. And then you're saying with this example, you have to take the principles from our example and create it for other genres. Instead of problem solution, it can be cause and effect. It can be narrating beginning, middle, and end. Right? You're just saying, take these principles, see how we have applied them, now go and apply it to other types of writing genre. Because you're structuring, the principles are the same, even though the writing genre is different. You're trying to help kids structure the output.
You nailed it, Don.
All right, Larry, your turn. What is something you want to highlight from the book?
Well, I think I'll highlight two briefly. One, I think Stefan Flanor's chapter on science instruction is really good. In fact, our science department used his book on science instruction for ELLs as a book study. So, and his strategies are applicable in all content areas. And so I think that people who are science instructors and non-science instructors will find those strategies helpful. And I think our chapter on additional opportunities and challenges people will find particularly helpful. It's sort of a it's not designed to be complete responses to all the challenges, but it gives people basic basic tools and ideas on how to respond to them. And those include student motivation, classroom management, error correction, social emotional learning, multi-level classes. Let's see, co-teaching. We're working with an aide, working with students with limited or interrupted formal education, SLIFEs, evaluating international transcripts. I mean, those are sort of just challenges that all of us deal with. And it was good. It was good for us to have to go through each of them as well to come up with how we handle it and what we can do differently and in better ways.
And you spoke about in the chapter of challenges, you talked about student motivation, and I know that you also have another book coming out about student motivation. So I always look to your Edutopia article on that.
Yeah, and that comes out of, I think, again, my organizing experience. So that, it'll be the fourth book in my series on student motivation. So, but right now I just want to get this done. We're working with Katie. So, and then I'm trying to get Katie to do another book after that. So, and she's excited about that prospect.
We've agreed not to talk about that until this one is done.
Well, we await the other one too, Katie.
Oh, the pressure.
Larry, can I circle back to the conversation of the chapter with Dr. Stephen Fleener about science? Can you talk more about that? Like, what can teachers take from that chapter from Dr. Fleener?
Well, I think there are so many, ranging just from, how to help students develop academic vocabulary understanding, right? I mean, and that's a challenge in all content areas. And, the strategies that he recommends, use of graphic organizer, pre-teaching, using cognates, they're all, just good strategies that I think a lot of teachers know, but, we forget, right? In the midst of stuff, right? We can't think of everything. I know that there's plenty of research done on the number of decisions that individual teacher has to make during the day, and it's an astronomical number. And I think what people will find helpful for example, in this chapter is, the chapter just once you read it just takes a few minutes to just glance through it right before a lesson, and it's just a refresher. And I'm sure that once people read that chapter, just as after people read the chapters that you wrote and the chapters that Carol wrote and Valentina wrote, that people will want to buy the books that all that you folks have written, including the book that you have coming up in September that Katie and I wrote a preface to, and are looking forward to doing an interview with you folks for Ed Week.
We are so honored to have been blessed by two of the highest gurus in the field.
Well, the great thing about the chapters is you always want people leaving wanting more. And I think those chapters serve two purposes. One, they make our book a lot better. Well, it's three purposes. They make our book a lot better. Two, they help teachers in the classroom. And three, they will hopefully entice, get people more intrigued to want more.
Right. Because each of your chapters can be a book in itself.
Mhm.
And yet the way you're saying, okay, we're not trying to cover all of culturally responsive instruction in this one chapter. We're trying to give you a starter into it, because this is, again, a survival guide. And so we're just taking a little bit, and then having people move into the path that they need to take for themselves.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit more about the data at the beginning of the research, and then, because it's been 10 years ago, how has the data changed? And then also, can we talk about the positive learning environment, and then we'll end the podcast.
Well, in terms of the data, we are, as we speak, working on that chapter. So, clearly, and I can speak a little bit to it and then turn it over to Katie. So I don't think we're not trying to hold back, but we have we have 6 chapters out of the 25 left to finalize, and that is one of those chapters. Clearly, the numbers of ELLs have grown, though they have not grown as much as they had in previous years, partially because of the xenophobic policies of the Trump administrations in not allowing, refugee immigrants to enter the U.S. But hopefully, I think that'll change. But but they have grown, and there continue to be large numbers of long-term ELLs, and there continues to be not clear ideas from schools about how to support long-term ELLs, which hopefully our book can try to help respond to. Katie, what are your reflections on what we're doing so far, what we've learned so far about the data?
Well, we're updating a lot, because it was 2012, and I can't believe that. It doesn't seem like it's been that long. So yeah, we're just updating a lot of obviously the statistics. Also, looking at a lot has changed in the conversation in terms of labeling English language learners, and unfortunately in the Trump era, it was, a lot of regression around, the language used for immigrants and people's, who speak another language other than English. And that, thank goodness, is changing kind of back with the Biden administration. So yeah, looking at just those larger pieces in that first chapter. And then, it's interesting because we have a section in that chapter, kind of a do's and don'ts and best practices. And a lot of those haven't changed, modeling, wait time, still important. But we're updating the research around some of those best practices too.
And something that stays the same throughout the years is creating a positive learning environment for students. Would you talk about that?
Yes. And I think, building relationships, we talk about, that's number one. But we also discuss helping students build relationships with each other, and building healthy relationships with parents, and inviting them in to a system that, is often unwelcoming, and how to do that. Larry,
I think,
do you have anything else to say about that?
Well, I think that in that chapter and throughout the book, the main theme of all our books and all of our teaching is focusing on and looking at students through the lens of assets instead of deficits. Looking at it at just as in your chapter, Don, you highlight the assets of a student's home language, and we look at the so many assets, the resilience. I mean, lots of research has shown that ELLs tend to have a greater sense of resilience and growth mindset and creativity based on their experiences. So I know that one of my favorite stories about deficits and assets was that teaching the colonialization of California by the Spaniards to a mixed class of Hmong refugees and Central Americans. And one of the questions I asked were, well, if you were a Native American, an enslaved Native American, basically living in some of the missions, would you fight, or would you just try to escape? And it was very interesting that all of the students who really hadn't been in that situation were very clear, oh, we would fight, right? We wouldn't try to escape. Whereas many of the Hmong students whose families had chosen to escape and escape into the jungle, said, no, we would escape and live, right? Because we knew and that sometimes in the situation we'd fight and die. And it was, and obviously that wasn't funny, but I mean, it was very clear from their experience that they had a different sense. And it was an extraordinary conversation between the two groups of students. And basically after that conversation, there was a greater understanding of, well, maybe escaping and living to fight another day is the better strategy. But it was you couldn't really have that conversation in pretty much any other classroom, right? The classroom did not have English language learners who hadn't had that experience and that insight.
Well, you have given us as you said, thinking through the asset lens. Well, this book has given us so many assets to tap into and so many resources to think about. So let's end the podcast with this. I reserve this question only for people who have been in the field for many, many decades and have contributed so much to the field. So I take it from Oprah, and she says, "This I know for sure." So after your years of advocacy work and years of publishing and writing and giving to the field, what do you know for sure when it comes to working with English learners?
I know for sure that building relationships is number one. And looking through a lens of assets versus deficits. Looking at who is in front of you, that they already have so much to share and so many experiences, and that it's an honor. It's an honor to be in their presence and to be able to learn from them.
Right. To hear their stories, to peer
Exactly.
into their world.
Exactly.
Right. I feel like, because Larry, you talked about English learners becoming incredibly resilient. I mean, they can teach us so much about humanity by hearing their stories. And that's and you talked about your Central American students and your Hmong students. And imagine the stories that they bring with them and what we can learn from them.
And their families too.
Right. Right.
Just I think about all through the years, just all of the beautiful families I've met and learned from.
So Larry, what do you know for sure?
Well, certainly I concur with what Katie said. I think from a teacher's perspective, I would say that I know for sure that I will have bad days in the classroom. And I know for sure that if I just try better the next day, it will be all right. That it always gets better. We always have bad days. We just put out positive energy. Positive beats negative all the time, and it'll just get better.
Right.
And students will generally forget the mistakes, the bad stuff that I did the previous day. Okay, so that's good. They're not,
Yeah, they do forgive and forget, and most importantly, every time you share when you have a bad day, it just means that you really care about your practice. If you didn't care, you wouldn't think about, oh, I didn't have a bad day.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So that just really shows that what kind of a teacher you are, and both of you, Katie and Larry. So this has been such a heart expanding experience. I am so excited. Like all of your books, I devour and love, and I return to like an old friend. Like, hey, how do I do this again? Oh, wait, that's right. Picture word induction model. Oh, wait, learning experience approach. Yes. And so Go ahead.
And we do the same thing because we forget stuff all the time. I tell you, I said that earlier about one of the great things with the books is so, we don't keep things organized and don't forget it. That is not an exaggeration. Okay.
That's another plug for teachers to create a blog, because I know I go back into my own blog and be like, wait, what did I say? How did I say that?
Yeah.
So again, thank you for standing beside teachers and helping us walk together on this march. You have always been, both of you are community organizers, and now you're organizing in a different way. I always say, I always start my podcast, my work with, may this serve kids I will never meet. Larry and Katie, you have served thousands of kids you will never meet.
You're very kind.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ton.